On the 26th of July in the year 1925, something extraordinary happened. It was the birth of a new era that caused people to rethink religion and what it means to be human. In the sweltering courtroom of Dayton, Tennessee, William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow were fighting for the right to teach evolution, or so it started. And then it began, the historic battle between evolution and creationism.
John T. Scopes' Great Monkey Trial, one of the most famous debates over evolution and creationism, successfully caused evolution to be taught in schools, sparked the campaign for the public to accept evolution, and consequently challenged people to rethink their previous ideas and beliefs.
John Thomas Scopes, the face of the revolution, was just an ordinary man. Born and raised in Kentucky, he eventually earned a degree in law at the University of Kentucky. He then moved to Dayton, Tennessee, and took a job as a football coach. At the same school, he filled in as a substitute teacher, teaching algebra, chemistry, and he taught physics as a full-time teacher. This relatively average 24-year-old man became the face of a historic campaign to abolish the Butler Act, an act that abolished evolution from being taught in schools, and to get the public to accept evolution.
20 days before, on July 6, 1925, Scopes and 4 other men met for the first time about their trial defending evolution that was soon to come. They proposed the daring idea to Scopes. Attorneys Herbert and Sue Hicks and Wallace Haggard, along with the engineer George Rabelais, told Scopes of their plan. The American Civil Liberties Union had said that if a teacher would be fine with being put on trial, they would finance a case that challenged the validity of the Butler Act. They actually meant for the trial to be a publicity stunt for the city of Dayton, Tennessee. Eventually, Scopes decided that this was for a good cause, and he finally agreed. He said, "If you can prove that I've taught evolution and that I can qualify as a defendant, then I'll be willing to stand trial." These were the words that sparked a revolution that not even the Union nor Scopes were aware of yet.
John Scopes, as a Tennessee teacher, was selected by the American Civil Liberties Union to test the legality of the Butler Act, a law that forbid teachers to teach their students about evolution of man from what it referred to as lower orders of animals in place of the biblical account. When the members of the American Civil Liberties Union chose Scopes and he finally agreed to teach evolution, he was sent to trial because he taught evolution to his students and for breaking the guidelines of the Butler Act.
The Butler Act was created because a wealthy fundamentalist man called John Washington Butler had heard about a girl in Tennessee who had come back from college believing in evolution and found this to be disturbing news. He found that evolution was also being taught in the high schools of Tennessee, including the school his son went to. He decided to do something about it. He ran for state legislator successfully, and his promise to remove the teaching of evolution in Tennessee schools became reality. He wrote the Butler Act, which fined anyone who taught evolution in Tennessee schools and universities $100 to $500. Governor Pay, who was a very religious man, successfully passed the Butler Act as a Tennessee law on March 21, 1925. At this point in time, religion was beginning to be hotly debated over. Many Christians were torn over the issue, some believing in evolution, but many of them rejecting it. It wasn't just Christianity that vastly rejected it, but many of the people in America did too, because it was a religious climate of the 20s.
The Scopes trial turned Dayton, Tennessee into a media circus. All the mines in Dayton had gone dry, and the population had gone from 5,000 to 18,000 by 1925. People came far and wide to witness the trial, and John Scopes said they were one of the rarest collections of screwballs. Prayer meetings, revivals, and other events were happening in the streets, and people with signs were all over. It was even the first trial to be broadcast on the radio. The small town of Dayton, Tennessee had turned into one of the most popular cities in America.
Scopes was not alone in the trial. His defender was Clarence Darrow. Darrow was involved in other cases in the Scopes trial, such as the Leopold Loeb case. In the Leopold Loeb case, Darrow managed to successfully save two friends, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, from the electric chair, even though they had already confessed to murdering a 14-year-old boy.
Very sharp, very clever, and very, very keen mind.
Darrow feared death, and as a result of this fear, none of his clients were executed, and Darrow said it would kill him if any were. By his 20s, he was already a lawyer. For Darrow, the Scopes case was a dream come true.
While Scopes had Darrow, everyone who opposed evolution and supported the Butler Act had William Jennings Bryan. Bryan, an American politician, was for a long time a progressive man who supported the ideals of women's suffrage, the rights of farmers and laborers, and believed in democracy. 3 times previous to the trial, he had run for President of the United States.
He ran for president multiple times, never made it. So he's a perpetual second-place person. I feel sympathetic toward him. I gather he was a really gifted orator. he never really pulled it off politically.
The American people loved him, but were shocked when he began the campaign in 1921 to abolish the teaching of evolution in public schools. As he used to be so open-minded, people began to wonder if he had given up his progressive ideals. As he became older, he began to think that Darwin's theories were the cause of much that was wrong with the modern world. As he stepped off the train in Dayton in the summer of 1925, he said he was ready to fight for a righteous cause.
The actual trial took place between July 10th and July 21st, a span of 11 days, but only occurred on 8 of those days. People had come far and wide to witness this trial, and even more listening in on the radios. On July 11th of 1925, the trial officially began. 3 schoolboys testified that they had been taught evolution by Scopes. Each side had their own basic arguments. On Darrow's side, the arguments were that creation is in conflict with modern science, so cannot be correct. That much of the Bible is impossible, contradictory, and illogical, therefore cannot be taken seriously, and that the Bible and evolution can be put together so that there will be no conflict between science and religion. Bryan, on the other hand, argued that God can change the laws of nature, that God supersedes scientific evidence, that when someone cannot explain or understand the Bible, that it just shows that they are inferior to God, not that the Bible is untrue, and that science is not conclusive about evolution.
The Scopes monkey trial resulted in many things, one of them being Scopes losing the trial. He was fined $100 in consequence. "Your Honor," Scopes said, "I feel that I have been convicted of violating an unjust statute. I will continue in the future, as I have in the past, to oppose this law in any way I can." Despite his apparent loss, a technicality was later found on William Jennings Bryan's part. Because of this, the case was never revisited, and no one technically won it.
The Scopes monkey trial was a major success in many aspects. First of all, the Scopes trial played a large part of repealing the Butler Act. Because of John Scopes and everyone else involved in the trial, evolution can be taught in schools across the nation. This historical event changed the minds of Americans everywhere for generations to come. On William Jennings Bryan's part, he was successful in the fact that he and the prosecution won the trial. On Clarence Darrow's part, he clearly won the debate, a major success for him, despite the fact that he did not win the trial. He also proved that fundamentalism is weak and lacking in science. In the end, its major successes were that it reincorporated evolution into schools, changed the minds of America's students forever, challenging them to think beyond what they always accepted.
The Scopes trial, like all others, had various failures. A quite immediate failure in the trial was that John Scopes was fined $100 and also had lost the trial. Though Scopes had lost the trial, he was thought to have won the overall debate. Another failure, this time not as immediate, was that it took 40 years for the Butler Act to be repealed. A failure on Bryan's part was that fundamentalism failed in the classroom and was eventually removed completely.
The consequences of the Scopes Great Monkey Trial were and are enormous. William Jennings Bryan's story, along with the trial, ended in late July 1925. As he was growing older and suffered from diabetes, the 8 long days of the trial took a toll on him. 5 days later, he died in his sleep. Many grieved and felt the deep loss of a great champion. Though most Americans held true to William Jennings Bryan's fundamentalism beliefs, evolution became much more accepted universally, and the public opinion began to change in favor of evolution. Evolution was also not taught in schools for 40 more years after the trial, until the Butler Act was finally repealed. The ideas presented in the Scopes trial were clearly a part of the decision to repeal the act, and the lasting debate that occurred in the Scopes trial also influenced this decision. Evolution is still widely contested today, as seen by censorship in textbooks and schools.
The Scopes monkey trial was certainly a historic event, one that altered the minds and hearts of future generations. It sparked debate between creationists and evolutionists, not over simply whether or not John Scopes was guilty, and not even if evolution was morally correct. It gave the evolutionists a chance to tell the world that they wanted to teach Darwin's theories in public schools, and it gave fundamentalists a chance to show the world that they thought evolution was ungodly and unfit to teach the youth of America. The Scopes Great Monkey Trial was an event that changed the course of the future forever. It was one of the most memorable of debates over evolution and religion in the history of the United States.
Man, I'd be crossing a line. You're an animal. You're not like me. You're an animal. I have dominion over thee. You might be my cousin, but I don't know if you could be my friend.